What is up everyone, it's Saber here and welcome to another Naruto What If. If you end up liking the video, please consider subscribing. It's free and you can take it back at any time and it really helps me out, and this is my second channel, so if you want some more what ifs, go check out my other channels. And with all of the YouTube formalities out of the way, let's get into it. Well done boy, cried the king loudly as he downed his glass of summer wine, happy that he just won 1,000 gold dragons. Ned couldn't help but smile as he looked down at the boy who just won the archery competition. He looked like he just had his 18th name day, but he managed to defeat hundreds of other archers in the tourney, including many heirs of lords and knights. A commoner winning the prize gold was one thing he hadn't expected, but it made him feel better. At least some of the gold wouldn't be going to the already fat pockets of lords or knights. Littlefinger smiled back at the king and bowed slightly. Congratulations, your grace, that is a most unexpected outcome and a good wager. Yes indeed. Tyrion held his wine loosely to his lips as he sat back lazily on his seat. That boy was certainly an oddity. I've never seen anyone split an arrow from so far away before. Looking over to the many lords and commanders, Tyrion could already predict that many of them would try to recruit the boy before long. He's already a much better archer than many we have in King's Landing. Tyrion looked a few rows above him and saw his lord father Tywin Lannister looking at the boy. He didn't look very interested, but there was a sense of intrigue in his narrowed eyes, something that Tywin Lannister passed off as praise. Ed, cried the king loudly, he's almost as good as you were back in the day. The hand of the king smiled and nodded. Yes, your grace. The man bowed slightly to the king before looking back at the young champion. It is wonderful to see such young champions come from the common people. I am growing tired of seeing the sons of lords and knights winning such tourneys. The king laughed and raised his glass to his old friend. Well said, it is as you said, my lord. Hand, but it does raise a question. Lord Mace Tyrell pondered as he sat on the left platform from the royal family. I hire the best teachers in Westeros to train my son Loras, and even though he is doing quite well, I doubt he has the same skill with a bow and arrow as that young man over there, which caused both Ned and Robert to nod in agreement. Both have heard of the young prodigy of the Tyrell family, Loras. I wonder how that young man managed to get so good. What sort of training did he undergo? I would assume hunting. Prince Oberyn suddenly said, drawing the other high lords and the king's attention. I've met many people during my travels that are very good archers, and most of them because they hunt for their food. The prince sipped on his wine as he looked at the king. Moving rabbits and wolves are much harder to hit than when compared to stationary targets. Robert chuckled and placed his cup down. I believe there to be good merit in that theory, but I've been hunting for a good part of my life and I can't split an arrow like that. The king laughed as his squire more and more wine. That kid is already better than me at shooting. Maybe some of us should take that boy and suggested Renly Baratheon as he stood next to his brother waiting for the joust to start. Such talent should not be wasted. Yes, I would very gladly take him under my house. Mace Tyrell spoke as he nodded at the king's brother. I'm afraid I must fight you for him, Lord Tyrell, replied Prince Oberyn with a smile on his face. Not only is he a skilled fighter, but he is also my house's sworn blacksmith. That, and I don't think he would be so willing to up and move now that he has a running business, he added, causing several people to raise their brows. The kid was an excellent shot with his bow, so the possibility of him crafting it by hand made much more sense. To add with the skills, he had more merit to his skills, but the fact he was also apparently skilled enough to draw the Dornish royal family's attention through smithing was just a bit more impressive to some of them. At the same time, many people around the prince wondered if the price wanted the young man as a soldier or a lover. Oberyn had a rather promiscuous reputation even with boys. My lords, please refrain from discussing such matters so soon. We still don't know if the young man would survive the day. Littlefinger spoke with his usual smile and sly voice. From my understanding, the boy also intends to participate in the melee competition. He still wants to fight in the melee, asked Mace Tyrell. Several of the other lords listened on with interest. Yes, my lord, Peter replied as he nodded. Some might have quit after winning 20,000 gold dragons, but apparently the boy still wants to fight. Littlefinger chuckled and shook his head. I'm afraid a young man is still a young man, and a boy's mind will always be greedy and overly courageous. You only think that because you have a merchant's mind, Lord Baelish said Doran as he looked over at the melee arena. Some young men think like warriors, and the thrill of a good fight may worth more than 20,000 gold dragons, he said wisely, causing Littlefinger's smile to shrink a little at the subtle insult, but remained silent. Who knows? Maybe he is as good with a sword as he is with a bow. The king chuckled and sat back on his seat. Littlefinger, I would like to stack my winnings, cried Robert as he pointed at the master of coin. That's 2,000 gold dragons on the boy. Naruto cracked his neck as the gate to the arena for the melee portion of the tournament closed and locked behind him. From what he could tell, there would be precisely 100 men fighting in this bout, and the next fight would be tomorrow at noon, followed by the joust but he wasn't particularly interested in hitting a man with a big stick off a horse. His current objective was standing on the other side of the arena clad in his steel armor, and while he would like nothing better than to simply crush him with a Raisin Shuriken, he needed to do this the way Oberyn and Doran told him to, which was why he was going to be using B's sword style to win this fight. Of course all the knights looked at him, as if he were stupid carrying so many blades on him, but what they didn't know was that the style he would reveal today would gain him such infamy that he would be renowned as the greatest swordsman of all Westeros and even Essos and Braavos history, so great that his legacy would surpass Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, and Gerald Hightower, two of the world's former swordsmen of the highest tiers. However, before the blonde could contemplate a plan to simply cut his way through the well-trained knights like a knife through butter, a deep voice drew his attention, nearly causing him to roll his eyes. "You better not screw this up, Kurama. You know as well as I do that these men stand no chance against Octopop's sword style." "That's not what I mean, and you know it. The fact that the king and his immediate family nor those pesky snake-obsessed people have spilled the beans on your abilities makes me curious as to what they're planning." "The snakes, I can understand. It was agreed that you'd be the one to avenge their family's death by that fool they call the Mountain. But he is hardly half the size of that third Rakage who fought my brother to a draw. Hell, the only reason he seems to be so strong is because he has mid-gen and level reserves available to him. Keep your eyes peeled. Something feels off, and you getting hurt only makes me look like the fool." And with that, Kurama retreated deeper into the seal without allowing Naruto to respond, and before Naruto could simply move to listen to the center of the arena, a voice spoke up next to him, gaining his attention. 20,000 not enough for you, boy?" asked a man in his 30s with oily dark brown hair. He had simple light armor on and held his sword by his hip. He looked like a common cell sword, if there ever was one, so much so that he still reeked of wine and whores. Having grown up in the slums, Naruto knew those smells well. Naruto gave a smile and shrugged. "Who said I was in it for the gold? Maybe I want fame as well, and one archery champion title is not enough for that. It is when you're a boy." The man chuckled as he looked around at the competition that he would be facing. "This is a man's game, and it's not a joke, not to mention that the people here would want to kill you even more since you showed some of them off during the archery event. More so some of the higher-ranking knights that have been trained by some of the best men this world have ever seen in their youth. Thanks for the warning, but I think I'll be fine," Naruto said. Calmly, the man chuckled and nodded. "So what's your name, boy?" "Naruto." "What about you, stranger?" replied the blonde as he looked at the man with his sword in hand. "The name's Bronn, just a cell sword." Looking forward to 20,000 gold dragons, Bronn sheathed his sword and placed a small knife on under the strap of his shoulder. "Fight already!" Robert's voice bellowed out. Naruto rolled back and away from a swing that would have taken his head, and he snorted as he grabbed a blade and moved with such speed. Most only noticed the flash of steel as 8 swords filled the air and fell down, causing several men in the arena to pause as they did a double take on what they had seen and were currently looking at. When Naruto took notice of the attention he had on him, he smirks through the handle of the blade he holds in his mouth as the large number of knights gaze upon the blonde as he holds 8 blades in between his left armpit, both elbows, right leg, stomach, the both sides of his neck, and the single sword in his mouth. And before the men could hope to taunt him, Naruto leaps into action by starting off with a roll forward, his body curling inwards to allow swift movement in between 3 men as he spins around and slices through their armor as if it were made of butter. Naruto then swipes his arm down and cleaves 2 swords being swung at him from both sides in half before he lashes out with his leg and impales a man in the leg, dropping him before blocking with a sword to his neck and spinning around and cutting the tendon to the man's leg from behind him. And with that, a dozen men seemed to gain that fighting one-on-one or even 2-to-1 wasn't the best idea and charge. However, much to their shock, Naruto flips up and releases some of the swords into the air, allowing them to flip end over end for moments before he lashes out with incredible speed and impaling 2 men before he spins around and quickly repositions each sword to the spot he had initially gripped them. Another spin and he decapitates 3 men before he kicks back and guts a man without turning around before he slices his nearest opponent in 2 minuscule amounts of wind chakra channeling through the blade as it cleaves the man in half before Naruto stabs the man in the head to end any future misery. Already all of the crowd is wide-eyed at the sheer brutality of this seemingly uncouth style of swordsmanship, but the results spoke for themselves. This was not a style mere men or knights could handle in a fight. If this boy had chosen to fight for Rhaegar back in the rebellion, he would have decimated Robert's army single-handedly if he had allied himself to the Bard Prince through sheer skill of swordsmanship. However, that was where the shock ended and was replaced by awe. Never before had any man, be he peasant or knight or even king, wielded so many swords in battle. At most, only the less preferred 2-sword style was ever used, but that was because only those blessed by the gods could use magic in such ways. Like this kid was this boy one such person. However, Naruto wasn't done activating the seals along each blade. He rolled back, ignoring the various amounts of blood getting into his clothes, and dropped the 8 blades to the seals on the swords. Activated it, prevented anyone from acquiring the blades and allowed Naruto to be able to reach for his hips. Grabbing the 2 handles, he pulled out a seemingly normal axe and hammer that were attached together, with a simple rope blocking with the axe. He smirked as he drew the hammer back and smashed it into the back of the blade, slicing through the high-quality steel and embedding the axe into the man's chest, causing several people to jump in shock at the unorthodox usage of both weapons. To these people, the weapons, the styles of fighting and usage of his weapons were unlike anything they had ever or would ever see in their lifetime. Stories would be told for generations about this day, and how the swords he used were blessed by the gods to never break, never rust, and cleave through any and all opponents he crossed in battle. Naruto grunted in annoyance as a sword sliced into his side, but the blonde simply glanced at the sword that had cut him before he did something that was so unexpected many had expected it. He threw the hammer at his opponent and watched as it slammed into his chest, forcing him to stumble back as Naruto yanked on the rope to pull the hammer to his hand, before he spun around and threw the axe into the man's skull before ripping it out and back into his hand. Now many of the knights were either attempting to avoid crossing paths with the teen, others not so much. Gregor Clegane obviously didn't care about the boy. He was the mountain that rides. He feared nothing. The blades were of seemingly high quality, as well as that little bow he used earlier when he killed the boy. He'd sell them for a pretty coin and take the boy's winnings and that fancy axe/hammer combo weapon for himself to cause more havoc across the lands. However, Gregor should have learnt, you never fuck with Uzumaki. With a yell, the large man charged at Naruto, drawing the blonde's attention, where he brought up the axe to block the swing of the man's large broadsword before he used the hammer to smash his chest and push him back. Spinning around, Naruto clashed steel against steel as he engaged in combat with the most infamous knight of Westeros. Naruto snorted as he swiped down and parried a strike to his neck, before spun around once more and brought the axe up and blocked a swing aimed at his waist, but in the process locked blades with the large knight, causing the man to grunt. He hadn't expected the boy to be this good nor this strong. What he didn't know was that Naruto wasn't using anything to help enhance his abilities. No chakra, no nothing. It was pure muscle and skill that was being brought forward to fight the monstrous man. Snorting, Naruto lashed out with a foot and kicked the man's knee out, snapping the joint and forcing the knight to kneel before him with a yell of agony before Naruto smashed the hammer into the left side of his jaw with such force the helmet Gregor wore dented and flew off his head, while several teeth flew out in a spray of blood as Naruto broke not just the man's jaw but crushed half the man's face to where he wouldn't be able to speak even if he managed to heal. However, if the people thought Naruto was done with the man, they were sorely mistaken, and before Gregor could hope to regain his senses, Naruto spun around a total of 3 times, and each spin connected the axe of Kabutoari to the mountain's body. The first spin cut through the man's throat, an instant death sentence for most men for sure, but this was the strongest knight of Westeros. Extra precautions were needed. The second cut into the man's chest, the axe cleaving through the man's heart, while the final one gutted him and ripped out the man's entrails. Gregor Clegane was dead before he ever hit the ground. The entire arena was silent, along with the pavilion and the civilian viewing area. Shock was apparent on everyone's face by the sheer brutality that the former knight had died from, but that was just it. Gregor Clegane was a monster and nobody would miss him, sure, but the mere fact he died to a man not even half his age, as he used a simple wood axe tied to a hammer with a simple rope, was what shook them to the core. Everyone taking some time to figure out what happened, and was the end of the match really so anticlimactic? But soon the judges broke out of the stupor and walked up to Naruto. Since you are the only one still standing, there can't be a second round. The man looked troubled as Naruto had the decency to look a little embarrassed. Once again, he might have overdone it. So oh, I don't know how to rule this. He looked back at his 2 counterparts, and they were also at a loss. Something so extreme had never happened before. What should we do? What the hell are you shits waiting for? Cried the loud and excited voice of the king. The boy is the winner. Announce it already. The main judge stammered a little at the king's voice before walking up to Naruto. This man is the winner, announced the judge as loudly as he could as he raised Naruto's arm into the air. Naruto of Dorne is the winner. Just like before, the entire audience exploded in applause. Civilians were jumping up and down, crying out their cheers of happiness, excitement, and awe. Never before had common men managed to win both the archery and melee competitions. It was truly inspiring for the civilians to see such an outcome, such a staggering and amazing outcome. Fathers were lifting their children over their shoulders so they could catch a glimpse of the people's hero, and the entire city was shaking in cheer and applause. Almost everyone on the pavilion was clapping, and more than a few of them were on their feet, the king being one of them. Robert was laughing and threw his cup of wine to the side in order to have both hands to clap. He stood from his elevated platform and looked down at the young man, who was still just smiling and nodded like a boy. That made the king laugh even more, and he started to gesture to Ned to come take a look at him. Prince Oberyn and his family were also on their feet, clapping with a smile on their faces for the vengeance they had gotten for the murder of their family. Mace Tyrell and Tywin Lannister were not standing, but they were clapping, which must have been really spectacular since even the great Tywin Lannister was clapping. Tyrion and Littlefinger were also clapping, but the latter was rather forced since he had lost another 2,000 gold dragons to the king. "This boy is certainly a talented warrior," cried the king as he pointed down at Littlefinger. "He's already won me 3,000 gold dragons and won himself 40,000. Robert laughed as he clapped Ned on the shoulder. "What's a lad like that going to do with so much gold?" he exclaimed so excitedly. The hand of the king chuckled and clapped along the others. "Whatever he wants, to your grace," Ned said as he turned to his king. After another few seconds of clapping, after another few minutes of endless applause, the crowd was silenced by the king, who stepped to the edge of his platform and raised his hands into the air. In seconds everyone was silent, and Naruto looked up at the king from within the battle arena. The judges read the silent order of the king and quickly led Naruto out of the battleground and showed him to the front of the pavilion, looking directly up at the king and many other lords of the nation. Naruto looked a little shocked at the sight and appeared to not know how to react under such a situation. "Don't need to look nervous, boy, I just want to talk to you," Robert said with his demanding voice laced with amusement. "Of course, your grace," Naruto said as he went down on one knee. "Though I must say that I'm sorry to be such a mess," muttered the young man as he noticed the mud, blood and grime on his body, hair and clothes. Robert gave a low chuckle as he held his wine cup to his lips. "Don't fret, boy, your king has been through battles as well and been in even worse filth." The king stepped down from his elevated platform and walked down to ground level. "So, you've become the champion of both the archery competition and the melee. What are you going to do with your winnings?" Naruto gave a chuckle and a sheepish smile. "I don't know, your grace, maybe a nice supper and a warm bath." The king laughed as some others chuckled. "You can do a lot more than that with 40,000 gold dragons." Robert stood directly in front of Naruto and smiled down at him. "Look up, boy." Naruto waited a second before looking up. "What do you plan to do now after the tourney is done?" "I also don't know, your grace. Maybe return to Dorne for a while, buy a house and continue to work as a blacksmith." "You can buy a house and several whorehouses if you want," joked Robert as he clapped Naruto on his shoulders, surprising the young man with his friendliness. "But I have a better suggestion." Robert turned to his squire and gestured to his sword, to which the squire handed him, and he placed on Naruto's shoulder. "I, Robert of the House Baratheon, the first of his name, king of the Undulls, and the first men lord of the Seven Kingdoms and protector of the realm, do so hereby grant you Naruto of Dorne knighthood." Once again the crowd sprang up in applause as Naruto looked up in shock. He wasn't the only one. Some of the lords behind the king looked surprised at the sudden decision, but some were smiling and nodding. Ned himself looked pleased, along with Prince Oberyn and Mace Tyrell, all agreeing on the king's decision. Tyene and her sisters were shocked, but quickly started to cheer for Naruto again, happy and shocked at his quick and rapid accomplishments. "Don't look so shocked, boy, men have been knighted for less, and what you did today was truly worthy of knighthood." The king patted Naruto's shoulder and gestured him to stand up. Naruto stood and looked the king in the eyes. "From today on you will be addressed as Sir Naruto." Naruto smiled and bowed to the king. "Thank you for this honor, your grace. Well, if you want to repay me for this honor, you can repay it by continuing to protect the realm of men from the horrors of men such as the Mountain. Don't get me wrong, he was a powerful warrior, but at the same time he made a terrible knight. While many people would agree with this, you just elevated yourself to the top of the list of the world's strongest warriors," Robert said before pulling Naruto to his feet and raising his arm into the air. "Sir Naruto of Dorne people," he yelled out loudly, causing the people to cheer loudly for the newly minted knight Dorne. Several weeks later, Naruto smashed the hammer down onto the flat bar of steel laying on his anvil. The ringing of metal filled the air as he switched the metal back into the furnace to grab a large plate of metal that was glowing red from the fire. Several dozen hits from the hammer later, and Naruto doused it in the quenching trough and set the tongs down. It'd be 40 minutes before the metals heated back up to a desired temperature, and even then it took 6 to 10 minutes to hammer the slabs of steel out to shape using minimal amounts of chakra to mold them and strengthen the steels without shattering them. Hearing the door to his shop open and Naruto turned to see Obara enter the room with a happy wave to him. "Hey Naruto," she greeted her friend. "Hey Obara, what's up?" he asked. Obara pointed with her thumb. "Nothing much, but apparently father has a job for you, says it is important for you and you might want to bring those fancy swords and other things you have stashed away with you. Apparently this is gonna be a long mission and might take a couple years to finish. Even for you." "She finished in what?" Seemed to be a depressed note. Okay, I'll go pack my belongings, I'll see you in a few minutes, he said, blinking a couple times before Obara nodded her head and left the shop. Water Gardens. Naruto sighed as he sat down before Doran and Oberyn and grabbed a biscuit from the plate into his snack. He looked to the Red Viper. So what's this about? I mean, I'm working on an important project back in the shop and suddenly get a call to see ya. Is there something wrong, Oberyn? Lord Doran, he asked curiously. This was unusual to the blonde, who hadn't really been called while in the middle of a project. Yes, it is a very important matter, one that we felt be discussed where nobody would be around, Doran said. Naruto snorted as he placed a hand on the table in front of the three men, and a series of seals emerged from where his hand made contact with the wood and formed an invisible barrier around them. Never believe you are alone. Even in the comfort of your own home, Lord Doran, it never ends up the way you think. Spies are literally everywhere. I sensed 6 surrounding us as I entered the Water Gardens. Now that I erected a privacy barrier, we can speak freely, and the spies will only receive word of the project being almost complete and small matters of me potentially working on less important things. So what's the real reason you called me? He asked Daenerys Targaryen and her elder sister Rhaenyra Targaryen. What exactly do you know of them, Oberyn? Asked the blonde. Well, I don't know much, mind you, as I'm still learning of all the major houses and minor houses of Westeros and several other cultures, but what I can tell you is probably common knowledge anyways. But I'll indulge you. Rhaenyra and her baby sister Daenerys are the last 2 members of House Targaryen after Rhaegar died in combat against King Robert. Their mother, I believe her name was Rhaella Targaryen, was married to her brother Aegis, I think. Anyways, the old king died to Ser Jaime after he betrayed him. The queen and her sole daughter Rhaenyra at the time were spirited away to Dragonstone, where the queen died in childbirth, but Robert allowed her to have an honorable burial due to her dying on the delivery as a form of respect to the old queen. Anyway, Rhaenyra and the infant Daenerys were shipped off to Pentos, and many noblemen who were loyal to the crown helped raise the 2 orphaned princesses until the current date. Robert dislikes the Targaryen bloodline due to some misbegotten grudge of the old Prince Rhaegar that he settled when he killed the man. Other than that, I have no clue, he said, shrugging. Well, you're mostly correct in your deductions. However, recently news has reached many of the noble houses here in Westeros that Rhaenyra has decided to wed herself in 8 months to the call of one of the larger Khalasar hordes, one that is rumored to have never lost a battle in his life, and from what many of my own spies say, I believe them. Khal Drogo is a man of power and status that if Rhaenyra were to have her way, she'd have an army of easily 100,000 or more. As Khal Drogo wins and defeats other Khals of the Dothraki hordes, if they do marry, she will be brought to the Dothraki Holy Lands and consummate the wedding there, and she'll be able to have her husband bring his vast army across the narrow sea. With a horde so large, she'd be able to match the strongest of allied houses. Something that hasn't been done in almost 3,000 years. Before various armies repelled the Dothraki masses back to Essos, where they rule a major portion of the continent, Oberyn explained. So what do you want me to do? I'm a blacksmith, not a miracle worker, Naruto responded. Actually you are. While we may have extracted some form of petty revenge against the Lannisters by being able to kill Gregor Clegane in front of the most powerful figures of the 7 kingdoms, we weren't exactly satisfied. Now I know you don't fight for such ridiculous reason, nor do we expect you to, but right now the crown is getting nervous over Rhaenyra wedding herself to Drogo. Knowing the heir, he'll send the best assassins in the world after her. We want you to go protect her, kill any and all who get in your way, make sure the Targaryen bloodline lives. With your knowledge of crafting Valyrian steel, you could make them powerful weapons to fight with and armor to protect them, and if you somehow hatch the eggs, you'll have a brood of dragons at your command to fight even the strongest of enemies. We defeated Rhaenys Targaryen and incited a war that nearly destroyed us from enraging Aegon the Conqueror 4 centuries ago. You'll be able to make yourself a king if the girls fall in love with you, and you can rule the 7 kingdoms as you see fit, Doran explained. I don't want to be a king, I'm fine with helping them, but I won't be marrying them. Hell, all you had to say was you wanted to make sure the rightful heirs to the Iron Throne lived, Naruto said. Well, it's also the main reason we brought you here. Robert Baratheon is dead as of 2 days ago, leaving Ned Stark in charge of the kingdoms until a rightful heir is brought forth to claim the throne, and so far things don't look good. Rumors of the queen sleeping with her own twin have surfaced, with the claim that the princes and princess are in fact a crime born of incest. To begin a Lannister dynasty, for the queen's own gain, we will remain silently neutral until the conflict dies down, and if there is a war, we will still have access to various resources from the remaining kingdoms. Despite the conflict, Cersei doesn't want the Targaryens to regain their throne, and some more startling news has come out as well about you. Actually, Doran winced at Naruto's curious expression. What about me? I'm just an ordinary blacksmith. Naruto shrugged. Tywin Lannister sent us a letter a week after we returned demanding to know your heritage, and even the queen wishes to Know the truth about you, as did the king before he died. They believe you are the rightful heir to the Baratheon dynasty and not Joffrey, who is Cersei's only known eldest. And then there are the shocking rumors that Ned has spirited away two of his kin, Jon Snow and Arya Stark, for what reasons we cannot explain, but he has freed Jon of his vow to the Wall and brought him to King's Landing, where Jon and his younger twin sister Arya were sent to Pentos, the very location we need you to be when all hell breaks loose. The ruler of Dorne explained. Naruto felt his jaw drop and his eyes widen. Kurama was laughing his ass off in the seal to no end, and Naruto was at a loss for words. He shook his head, ignoring the Nine Tails' laughter for the time being as he looked to Doran. "Me a prince? Shut up," he called out in shock. "I beg your pardon," Doran asked in his own shock as Oberyn laughed. "I mean, a damn sorry," Naruto apologized. "Well, shut up doesn't always necessarily mean to shut up," Oberyn said, laughing. "But me a prince? It's not possible. I explained to them that I wasn't related to them," he said to Doran. "That may be, but Cersei and somehow Ned disbelieve the notion of you being some backwater orphan with you revealing to them of your magic prowess. The potential of Robert's diluted Targaryen blood comes into play. The Targaryen were known to have once been able to practice magic and other forms of mysticism. As such, it is a very sound theory, one that Prince Joffrey vehemently dislikes. He always prided himself being the eldest of his living siblings. Before rumors of your relation to Robert and Cersei started spilling around the Seven Kingdoms, that is the main reason we are sending you to Pentos, so that when everything dies down you can come back and continue to work in the blacksmith shop as you see fit." Naruto placed a hand in hair. "I'll be honest, I didn't think they'd keep my abilities a secret this long. Even Joffrey himself. Shit, this is definitely unexpected," he said before dispelling the barrier. "I'll see what I can do. You guys carry on with the day. I'll come by in a week if things manage to settle themselves by then, and if not, send a runner and I'll get things done on my end," he sighed as the two men nodded. Turns out it was less than 3 days later that news of Ned Stark's death spread to all corners of the Seven Kingdoms, and the reason as to why he sent his twins to Essos was given up. Hell, the rumor of him being a prince was also brought into the multitude of letters that were handed out amongst the noble houses of Westeros. So the reason that Ned sent Jon and Arya over to the other side of the world was due to the fact that Ned revealed that they weren't his kids in the typical manner. They were his niece and nephew respectively, as Lyanna Stark had secretly wedded Rhaegar and birthed them as the true royal heirs, and Ned sent them away for safety purposes. Joffrey had started a war when he beheaded Ned, when he claimed the prince was born of incest to the Seven Kingdoms, and now a hit was out on Naruto's head on Joffrey's orders so that he could have a true claim to the throne and do as he pleased with his subjects, much like the Mad King. And so, without waiting any longer, Naruto sealed away the 3 eggs, the armor, the Valyrian steel scraps and weapons he had, and anything pertaining to the valuable metal, in a seal on his arm. Now he was running at top speed across the sea to Pentos, where Shirera and her sister were said to be residing. Jon, or as his birth name was called, Jaehaerys Targaryen, was the elder of the twins. His sister Arya, his assumed cousin who was his twin sister, was truthfully named Visenya Targaryen, was the youngest of Rhaegar's children and the rightful princess, with a greater claim than Shirera and Daenerys together. As for Naruto, he had no claim but a good portion of the Seven Kingdoms sans Joffrey, and a few of those who were like-minded like he was. Believed he was Robert's true heir. Swift away when he was born, as his parents were handed him under the influence of milk of poppy so he could be sold into slavery, and only returned with Doran and Oberyn as a way to show that he was still alive. He had no idea who had crafted such a tale, but he wanted to kick said person in the rear so hard they flew to the moon. He didn't want a throne. Hell, he didn't desire to even be a royal person in the first place. Now, while he wasn't using any of his higher states of power, Sage Mode was still a powerful asset he could use, and it easily quadrupled his power, so he was running easily as fast as the wind itself. He had already seen the ship that carried the rumored royal twins, zipped around their ship, gazed upon them, and had left without ever being spotted. He was about halfway to Pentos by now, and he had a several-hour journey left to complete. Yes, it was a fast trip, but ninja could cross entire countries in a few days with chakra. This was nothing special to the blonde. Hell, the distance he was going was about as far as Konoha to Taki, a few hours at the most. Naruto grinned as he saw the approaching shoreline. He was finally in Essos, well, Pentos, but yet finally reaching the mainland of Pentos. Naruto was quick to duck into a abandoned alley and allow his sage jutsu chakra vanish, and a small wave of fatigue came over him, but was quickly washed away by his quick recovery rate. Now then, how was he gonna get into the good graces of the Targaryen heirs? A few hours later, a man was walking down the street looking for his next target, but couldn't help but feel that someone was watching him. He turned around and just saw a normal street, not paying any mind to the hooded figure sitting on the bench. He went on his way and began singling out targets, but couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He turned around only to see a normal crowded marketplace. Not seeing the hooded man standing in the center, the man noticed a young boy with a oyster cart Making his way out of the market, Naruto watched as the man produced a knife and began walking to the boy. Naruto's pace sped up, but he kept his feet light. He watched as the man inched closer and closer to the boy, but his face remained stone, still no emotion at all. Just as the man was about to reach the boy, but he was pushed into an alley and against a wall with the point of a blade against his throat. As he stared into the blue eyes of Naruto Uzumaki, "You were gonna kill that boy if I hadn't stopped you, weren't you?" The man began to quiver in fear as Naruto pressed his blade harder against his throat. "Weren't you?" he demanded with a snarl. The man nodded as tears began to fall from his eyes. "I've killed people for much less, but today's your lucky day." Naruto removed the blade from the man's neck and placed it on his hip. "You're not gonna kill me?" Naruto laughed. "Oh no, at some point during today you are going to die. But the way this conversation goes will determine how long you'll live." "What do you mean?" Naruto smirked. "How good are you with that blade?" Later that night, Daenerys Targaryen stood on her balcony looking up at the moon. Tomorrow she was set to meet the man whom her sister had traded herself to like a trpphy. She felt bad for Shirera. Shirera was so strong, willful and kind. To think she would go this far as to try and get the throne back was unthought of. She heard stories about the Dothraki in her mind, could only imagine what they'd do to her beloved sister. She truly hoped she'd meet a man that she'd love and eventually settle down and marry him. Daenerys was broken from her thoughts when she heard a noise in her room. She turned around and slowly approached. "Who's there?" She tentatively walked forward, her fear increasing with each step. Then she felt someone grab her from behind and place a knife to her neck. "Scream for me," the voice whispered in her ear. Daenerys let loose the loudest scream she could muster, and guards quickly entered her bed chambers, along with Shirera and Magister Illyrio Mopatis. The guards drew their swords, and Shira had a blade in her own hand as she spoke. "Let my sister go, or I'll have you slaughtered like livestock. This is your only warning," she warned the man sternly. The man remained silent, and the guards went to advance, but stopped when they saw a hooded figure enter the room from the balcony. He placed his hand to the man's neck, and everyone heard the sound of a blade entering the man's neck. The man immediately let go of Daenerys, who stumbled to the floor, and Naruto pulled the man closer. "I told you that you'd die today," as he then shoved his hidden blade deeper into the man's neck before dropping his lifeless body to the ground. The assassin looked up and saw the guards still had their weapons drawn. "Please, there's no further need for violence," he said, holding his hands up as he showed them he meant no harm. They ignored his words and advanced. Naruto simply sighed and unsheathed his sword, and gave a simple slash, all in one simple motion, and his Valyrian steel blade cut through the man's chainmail armor like butter and spilled his innards on the marble floor. Everyone watched in shock as the guard tried to put his guts back in his body. Only Shirera managed to form words as she held her hand up. "Who are you, stranger?" Naruto ignored the princess and looked at her sister, who was on the floor, and held his hand out for her. Daenerys stared at Naruto as her eyes drifted down to the sword in his hand, and she took note of the blood dripping from where the blade was hidden away in his wrist. But this man had just saved her, so she made the decision to take his hand. The Uzumaki smiled as he helped her up. Something deep in his mind told him this girl was special. She was definitely beautiful. "Are you okay, my lady?" Daenerys blushed and managed to nod her head up close. She was able to see under his hood, and her eyes looked into his blue ones. She could feel him studying her. Naruto looked down at the woman before him. She slouched a bit. She only wanted to go home. She wanted to see her sister smile as she sat on the throne she was to inherit by right of blood and birthright. Her violet eyes kept in contact with his blue ones as her mind pondered what would become of her. "After all of this, I asked you a question, and I will not ask again." Naruto internally sighed, and only Daenerys noticed his grip on his sword tighten, and she gulped. If this man wanted everyone in this room dead, he could accomplish it, but his next action surprised him. The young assassin turned to Shirera and kneeled. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki, and I was sent here by a mutual friend in Dorne to ensure that you reached your natural birthright. If you will have me as your right-hand guard, I will serve you, Lady Shirera." Shirera looked at Naruto in shock, and then she growled in annoyance. "Oh really?" she asked, "and just who is this so-called mutual friend in Dorne that sent you? Don't try and lie to me. For all I know, you could be another assassin sent by the Baratheon, like the one that came a couple months ago when news of my betrothal to Drogo got out. Stand and speak," she commanded. Naruto nearly groaned, but stuck to rolling his eyes before lifting his head up. "Yes, your grace." "Really? As for who this mutual friend is, it was Lord Doran, ruler of Sunspear, as well as his brother Oberyn Martell. I was sent to make sure that you survived long enough to see you reclaim your throne. It was also to get away from the false rumors of me being Robert Baratheon's heir apparent, which I am not, by the way, and to see that your niece and nephew made it to the shore safe and sound." Shirera shook her head. "What niece and nephew? Rhaenys and Aegon are dead, and so are Rhaegar and Elia, so there are no other heirs besides Dany here," she said, storing the information of him being a supposed heir to the usurper to the back for the moment. "This is not true, my lady," Naruto said, pulling out a couple documents. "If you would be so kind, these are the letters Dorne was given by former hand to the King Ned Stark before he was beheaded at the now ruling heir Joffrey Baratheon. He said holding them out they are open, yes, but these were the original letters sent by Varys of King's Landing that he read before telling me to come to you and make sure that the last remaining Targaryens survived at any cost. He told her against her better judgment. Shirera took the letters and opened them, and what she read shocked her. Time skip. Naruto stood next to Shirera and Daenerys calmly, the plump magister Illyrio Mopatis waiting the arrival of Khal Drogo. He was alone while everyone was out and about making preparations. Naruto could tell that they didn't understand the customs of the Dothraki, and he hoped none of them offended them, though it would end his mission early. He doubted that even at full power he could kill that many Dothraki. This was without chakra, but as it stood he knew he could easily dispatch those who proved themselves a threat. Saru Uzumaki soft voice spoke. Naruto laughed as he turned to Daenerys. Please call me Naruto. I'm nothing special. Daenerys nodded. Well, Naruto, I wanted to thank you for last night. If it wasn't for you I'd be dead. Naruto smiled. Of course my lady, I couldn't have that man hurt a hair on that pretty little head of yours. Now could I? He jested. Daenerys blushed and was gonna say something, but the arrival of Illyrio stopped her. Naruto, why are you not at Lady Shira's side? Naruto sighed before bringing back up his facade. Apologies, your lordship, I'm new to this Kingsguard job, but my duties spread to not just Her Highness Shirera, but that of her sister as well. The fat man scoffed. Someone could have killed her by now. He seeded. Naruto shook his head. While I may not have been with her, I promise you no one who I wouldn't allow would get within 10 feet of her. Grace Illyrio reluctantly nodded, and everyone set up for the arrival of Khal Drogo, who surprised everyone when he left after taking one look at Shirera as she stepped forward to present herself to the man. Where's he going? Did he like her? Daenerys asked curiously. Shirera silently watched the retreating forms of the Dothraki, and Naruto laughed. Trust me, if he didn't like her we'd know, he said solidly. And how do you know that? Daenerys asked. Because I'd be cutting their heads off right now, the blonde responded. It had been a week since Jon/Jaehaerys and his twin sister Arya/Visenya had been revealed to be the rightful heirs of House Targaryen, and Naruto had explained that they would be arriving around the time she was taken up by Drogo. When he truly wished to marry her, Shirera sighed and turned around and stepped up beside her sister. So Sir Naruto, I assume you come from old house. Despite having never heard of the House Uzumaki, she said as the sisters walked beside the assassin titled Knight. Can you explain how it is you became a knight? She asked. I was anointed knighthood by the usurper before he died, but it was over a petty fight against the mountain, a grudge held by someone who knew they would not best him, and as I am proficient with a multitude of fighting styles, I killed the man and was anointed the title of Sir. He explained. Do you have any house that you align with? I assume you have a deceleration of some sort. Shirera asked him. Well, not so much a deceleration, but a motto I live by. My personal saying is I never go back on my word, as I took it upon myself to always make sure to fulfill any promise I made so as to not look bad, but I have several I live by that I can share with you. He offered. Oh, the princess, I would like to hear them. I'm sure they are an inquisitive series of phrases. She said. You are quite right, your grace. He nodded. The first is a simple play on words that my people learned to live by, something we adhered to over the past 1,000 years, before they were nearly wiped out in what I can only describe as a war between assassins, the fourth great shadow war as we call it. I myself was an important asset to this battle, the likes of which could only be described as a war between the gods when it reached the apex of fighting. But back on track, the adhering words I will tell you go far deeper than what you might think, he said calmly as he stood beside her. And what exactly are these words? Daenerys asked him from beside her sister as they walked towards the large mansion. Naruto gave a soft smile. Nothing is true, everything is permitted. This is my people's creed maxim, the most sacred of our words. I don't think I quite understand, Sir. Danny said in confusion. Most wouldn't. Naruto replied to his platinum blonde-haired friend. It's a play on words, he explained. For you see, the creed cannot be killed even if all of its followers were. He told her when it was founded the creed was an idea, and even if all records of it were to be destroyed, it could eventually be reinvented by another. Even the maxim commands any leaders not to be free, but to be wise, and for a person to abide by the maxim they must to transcend the illusion which is the world, and to recognize that laws do not arise from divinity but reason itself. He told her. I see. So you see the world in neither black nor white, but in shades of gray. You would use logic in place of emotional decision, despite having the desire to make such a hard choice. Shirera said an observation very astute of you, your grace. You would indeed be correct. However, you must understand that the maxim is not a doctrine to be followed, but merely an observation of the world. To say that nothing is true is to realize that the foundations of society are fragile, and that we must be the shepherds of our own civilization. To say that everything is permitted is to understand that we are the architects of our actions, and that we must live with their consequences, whether glorious or tragic. The maxim merely serves as a guide and a warning rather than as a principle meant for an individual to follow, and having witnessed directly how ideals led to dangerous extremism in some cases, he stated, "Please explain." Daenerys said Naruto walked with his hands behind his back. Ideals too easily give way to dogma. Dogma becomes fanaticism. Only we can decide whether the road we walk carries too high a toll. All that we do, all that we are, begins and ends with ourselves, he told her. In fact, the makes also comes with its own form of ironies. Irony? Shirera asked quizzically. Of course there are several of them. Such a irony is asking ourselves, do we bend the rules in service to a greater good, and if we do, what does it say of us? Naruto explains as he tries to explain how the ninja truly live. The three great ironies are observations that had been noted by the visual perception taken by one's own interactions with people around them, and described the contradictions between the creed and the actions of those who followed it. These ironies are: a ninja lives to seek and promote peace but commits murder. A ninja lives to seek to open the minds of men but requires obedience to rules. A ninja lives to seek to reveal the danger of blind faith yet practices it themselves, though seemingly hypocritical. The ironies do not undermine the actual cause, rather they demonstrate the way in which my people and I openly embrace contradiction so that one may be two things opposite in every way simultaneously. Another core part of this irony is the importance of knowledge, which allows one to learn and advance. He tells them calmly. Fascinating. I would like to hear more on this, Shirera says curiously. Naruto smiles at her. I would be glad to tell you. He says there are three simple moral tenets that focus on ensuring a successful mission: mastery of emotions and the safety of allies. They are: stay your blade from the flesh of an innocent. You don't harm those with no intention of harming others or yourself, no matter the reason behind it. The goal of a ninja is to ensure peace in all things. The ninja believes that political assassinations and the death of the corrupt would bring peace and a true sense of security to the common people. Slaying innocents and civilian bystanders who did not need to die could spread strife and discord. In addition to ruining the name of the ninja way itself, it also prevented them from achieving their higher purpose as a precise killer instead of an indiscriminate butcher. He tells the Targaryen sisters, hide in plain sight. He speaks up, let the people mask you such that you become one with the crowd. He told them, be unseen. He spoke to them. A ninja's aim is to get close to their target stealthily and escape just as quickly. In more ancient times, a ninja aimed to perform ostentatious, awe-inspiring assassinations, usually in public. The greatest illusion from such an assassination was that the ninja seemingly materialized from nowhere, killed a corrupt public figure, and vanished into the depths of the crowd or environment. If a ninja was spotted while stalking their target, the supernatural effect would be diluted and it became more difficult for them to reach a target. Never compromise yourself. Its meaning should be obvious. One's actions must never bring harm upon us, direct or indirect. The actions of one must never bring harm to all. If a ninja failed in their duty and was captured or chased, they must never commit any action or say anything that could be tied back to their homeland or bring harm to any member of it. I had no idea your people held such ideals so closely, Sir Naruto. Those of your heritage must be quite proud of your skills, Ilario stated. Naruto shrugged. I wouldn't know. I have not seen nor heard from any of them in quite some time, he said to the fat man. Well, if you do see them, send them my regards for such insightful ideologies, to see the world for what it is and not what it appears. As the man said, come, let us eat the call, and his riders will return in the morning for you, my lady, he said to Shirera and Wav, my nephew and niece. Upon their arrival, Shirera asked, we will come meet you at the wedding if time permits it. Ilario spoke to her. They should be arriving at the port in the later portion of the morning, your grace. Naruto said he sent clones out to push the ship across the water through the night at faster speeds, but not so fast they would arrive before Shirera was taken. But at the moment her wedding was taking place tomorrow on the coast. This is good. I always wished to meet a child, my elder brother, if any had survived, she said, smiling. It was late at night. The entire estate was asleep. For one, Naruto silently ventured through the estate and hid from the guards who patrolled. He knew the large estates always had hidden spots and cellars that hoard large quantities of valuable items. He was searching for these things so as to see if the Magister could be liberated of unused items, and it just so happened he had learned of the location of his secret vault. Ilario used, quickly picking the lock and entering the room with a silent moan of the wood. Naruto stood up and coated his hand in Kurama's golden chakra to illuminate the room. Well, this would take some time to go through. The next day, Naruto stood stone still in his full gear next to Daenerys and watched as people presented Drogo and Shirera lustrous wedding gifts. On his hips were the twin lightning fangs, his back held Shibuki, and next to his feet were the Kabutawari. The young assassin's eyes scanned the crowd for threats, but they always landed back on Shirera. Occasionally the two would lock eyes and the female Targaryen would offer him a smile whenever she could. Unknown to them, one of Drogo's blood riders noticed this exchange. Shirera tore her eyes off of Naruto as a man dressed in Westeros garb appeared. Khal Drogo greeted him in Dothraki and the man returned it in the same language before turning to Daenerys and switched to the common tongue. A small gift for the new Khaleesi songs and histories from the Seven Kingdoms. He offered them to the woman. Shirera took the books from the man. "Thank you, sir. Are you from my country?" The man smiled. "Yes, my name is." He was unable to finish as another voice spoke up from nearby. "Sir, you're a Mormon of Bear Island." Yoro looked at Naruto in surprise. "And how do you know who I am?" Naruto smirked under his hood. "Not exactly. You're quite famous in the Seven Kingdoms, sir. You're selling men to slavery. We'll get your name out there, though. I only know this from hearing your name and asking for a description of you." The Targaryen sisters looked at Yora in shock as he nodded solemnly. "Yes, you are right. I did sell people into slavery and I was cast away from my family and had to flee my country. I'll say I'm paying for my crimes." Naruto smirked and nodded. "Fair enough." Yora turned back to Daenerys, but not before shooting a suspicious look at the blonde as he turned back to the Khaleesi. "I served your father for many years. Gods be good. I hope to always serve the rightful ruler." Shirera nodded and Yora stepped down before a servant placed a chest with 3 beautiful egg-shaped stones. Dragon eggs. Khaleesi from the Shadowlands beyond. As high the ages have turned them to stone, but they will always be beautiful. "A gift from us here in Pentos," Ilario said, smiling at the woman. Shirera stared at the eggs and marveled at them. "Thank you." Last but not least, Naruto causally walked to the newly married couple and produced a book. "It's another book, Khaleesi, the tale of the utterly gutsy shinobi, written by my godfather Lord Jiraiya," he said, bowing to her. Shirera nodded and smiled at Naruto, who returned it and nodded at Khal Drogo before turning to leave. "Stop." The young assassin turned around and saw one of Khal Drogo's blood riders pointing his arak at him. The blood rider looked at Khal Drogo and spoke in Dothraki. "This man stares at your new wife when he think no one sees him. He wants to fuck her." Khal Drogo calmly turned his eyes to Naruto. As Yora began to translate, he said, "I know what he said." Naruto surprised everyone when he turned to the blood rider and relied in Dothraki wasn't that hard when he had several 100,000 clones travel the continent and research every fucking language, a total of up to 30 variants of Valyrian alone before getting to the others. "Why would you assume that I would want to fuck her? She's a taken woman," he responded calmly. The blood rider's glare intensified as he took a few steps towards Naruto. "So you are calling me a liar?" Naruto shook his head. "I've said no, Sue." The man swung his arak at Naruto, intending to take his head off before he could finish talking. Shirera gasped and Daenerys held her breath while Khal Drogo leaned forward, much more interested in this fight than the past two that occurred. Naruto ducked under another attempt to take his head off and then pulled his midsection back as the man tried to gut him. Naruto backpedaled as he ducked under slash. As soon as back hit a wall of flesh as the other members of Drogo's Khalasar pushed him forward, forcing him to duck under another slash. Naruto growled and glared at the man. "Stop now before I really hurt you." The blood rider ignored his words and charged forward. He began rapidly trying to hack and slash at the young assassin, but Naruto was too quick and evaded every attack. "Fight back," the blood rider demanded. He came down with another slash, but this time instead of dodging, Naruto caught his wrist. Fine. Naruto twisted his body as he now stood back to back with the man while still holding his wrist, and he was able to look at the face of Khal Drogo, who had an amused smirk. Naruto squeezed the man's already twisted arm and forced him to release his hold on his weapon. Naruto quickly grabbed the curved blade and spun around while swinging the blade. Drogo's entire Khalasar became quiet as the blood rider's head hit the dirt. Drogo rose out his seat as Naruto pulled a kunai out of his hip pouch and picked up the severed head and cut the braid before dropping it. Several Dothraki warriors drew their weapons, but Naruto reached for his sword before Drogo raised his hand and everyone stood still. "You've killed a blood of my blood." Naruto nodded. "Yes, and I apologize, great Khal. I wish it could have been avoided, but he died in combat. There is no greater glory." Khal Drogo nodded and ordered his men to stand down. "You speak the truth. What is your name?" Naruto smirked. "Naruto, the last survivor to the clan Uzumaki," he proclaimed. "Old Dothraki, a name that hasn't been spoken since the Forgotten Age. Many a warrior would speak of such a name from dreams of a man who could move entire countries. May you have the same strength as the great king once did," Drogo stated calmly before he sat back down as a slave escorted 2 people forward, 2 dark-haired and young men roughly 17 to 18 years of age. Naruto chose to ignore the man's words. He had no idea as to what he meant. "Your Grace, I believe you have been waiting all too patiently to meet them," Ilario said. as he gestured to the twins before the new Khaleesi, your brother's children Jaehaerys Targaryen and his sister Visenya, but they choose to go by their given names of Jon and Arya. He introduced her here. Shirera cheered as she leapt up happily and embraced her long-lost family. Oh, this is so exciting, she said in excitement before looking to her sister Dany. Come here, meet our long-missing family, she called out. A few hours later, after the wedding, Naruto was allowed to sleep in the hut that previously belonged to the Blood Rider that Naruto killed Kohallo by Khal Drogo. Drogo said that he would reap the rewards of slaying Kohallo in combat. The blonde-haired man laid in his bed, and with only one candle shining light in the room, a deep grumble growled in his mind. Naruto, wake up, you got company, Kurama warned him just as his own senses picked up the sound of rapid footsteps, and his eyes shot open just in time to see several Dothraki warriors storm the hut with their weapons drawn. Years of training with Jiraiya had taught him to always be prepared, especially in hostile areas. As soon as the first man was a few feet away, Naruto jumped up and springboarded out of the bed and into the air before landing on him with his blade in his chest, the Kiba blade dripping crimson blood, as he rolled off the man before Naruto then caught the wrist of the next and slashed him across the stomach before flipping him over his shoulder. He then lashed out with his left hand as he drew its twin and caught another man in the throat as he spun around and dropped to a knee and cut through a man's gut as he bisected him. One man tried to sneak up on him, but Naruto caught his sword hand and slashed his throat with his right blade before using the sword as a spear to take out another. He quickly turned around and delivered a high kick to another man's chin that had so much force it snapped the man's head back and broke his neck. Naruto took a deep breath as he looked down at the bodies on the floor, but didn't relax as he heard more people running to the tent. Fuck me, the blonde grunted as soon as the first man entered. Naruto threw him aside and headbutted the next man behind him, and he dropped as Naruto shattered his nose. He then turned around as the man he threw aside charged at him with a club. The ninja caught his hand and sent a palm thrust into his chest, a palm thrust that was aided by his hidden blade. Lightning blade, he exclaimed as the blade was immediately supercharged with 1,000 bolts of electricity. Ahhhhhh. The man let loose a scream as he repeatedly threw palm thrusts at the blonde in the body before he fell limp. The blonde warrior dropped the lifeless body to the side as a large man entered the tent. He had an axe in his hand and a sword at his hip. As soon as he entered the hut, he launched his axe at Naruto, who barely got out of the way. He pulled the blade up and charged at the young man, who pulled his arm back and extended his own once more and attempted to slash the brute, but got shoulder tackled into the wall of the hut. The man tried to slash at Naruto with his sword, but Naruto ducked under it and attempted to lash out with his Kiba blade, but the Dothraki warrior simply leaned out of the way before throwing a punch at Naruto. Naruto blocked the punch with his forearm before attempting to use his other blade to slashed the man across the stomach, but he leaned back just in time. Naruto threw a punch at the man's head, but he simply ducked under it and hit Naruto hard in the ribs before he could get his guard up, and then took a hard hit to the face before getting kicked in the chest. Naruto groaned as his back hit the ground. His vision was blurry and he could taste blood on his lips. He took a haggard breath as the Dothraki warrior slowly walked over to him. Is that all you've got, outsider? I'm disappointed, he smirked as he raised his sword high and was about to impale him, but Naruto's left hand shoot out and an arrowhead flew out of the bracer and embedded itself into the man's stomach. The brute groaned as blood began coming out of his mouth as Naruto got back up and slashed at both his legs, which got the man to fall to his knees before Naruto the young assassin looked the Dothraki brute in his eyes before plunging both of his blade into the man's chest. I don't know, you tell me, he asked before yawning. It's too early for this shit, he growled as he slowly woke up and began to sense the people outside while Naruto was inside battling for his life. Khal Drogo's entire Khalasar gathered outside to see the outcome. Khal Drogo himself sat on his horse with his two blood riders on either side of him, each of them staring intently at the hut off to the side. Shirera, Daenerys, Jon and Arya all stood in the entrance of their tent. Shirera in her shared hut with Drogo covered in only an animal pelt while her family was in the one next to it. She tried to hide her tears, but they fell anyways. Tears for Naruto and tears for being taken by Drogo. She knew what she was getting into, but she never imagined it to be like this. Jon shook his head. Such a shame, he looked like he was a good fighter. He would have killed hundreds, and Lady Shira's name, I wouldn't count him out so fast. He did kill one of Drogo's blood riders with ease, might I add. Yora spoke. Jon shook his head at Yora's words. Khal Drogo sent 10 men into that hut with the order for them to bring Naruto's head out while he was asleep, might I add. He said his last words in a serious tone, and the former Lord of Bear Island nodded. How did you come across a warrior as skilled as Naruto? Uzumaki, Arya asked. He saved my life from an assassin, came out of the shadows and shoved a blade in the man's neck before pledging his fealty to my sister, though it seems and may mean nothing now, Daenerys said sadly. The group heard a lot of murmuring, and Yura smirked as he looked at the hut. John and his sister strained their necks to look and was surprised when he saw the figure of Naruto walk out of the hut. He wore only a pair of trousers and his body was covered in so much blood that it was hard to tell if it was, as he gripped his left side with one hand and the other kept a tight hold on his sword. But Yura noticed the blood leaking from his bracers. Naruto limped towards Khal Drogo, who looked at him smirking. The young assassin spared a look at Daenerys, who looked relieved to see him alive, before turning his attention back to the call. What is the meaning of this? Everyone became silent as all eyes fell on Drogo, who looked at his blood riders before turning to Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki, you killed one of my blood riders. The blood of my blood. Naruto tensed up and gripped his sword tighter. A call must always have 3 blood riders and you showed skill that cannot go to waste, but you had to be tested. Kohallo saved my life 10 times, so I sent you 10 opponents to prove your worth, and you, Naruto Uzumaki, have proven that you can ride by my side as blood of my blood. One of Drogo's blood riders handed Drogo a knife and he cut his palm before tossing the blade to Naruto, who looked at the blade while weighing his options. Fuck it. Naruto cut his own hand and shook hands with Khal Drogo. One of the blood riders motioned something forward and a dark black horse was guided towards him. Naruto approached the steed and climbed on top of it, and Drogo turned to the rest of his Khalasar. Welcome, Naruto Uzumaki, blood of my blood. The entire Khalasar cheered and Naruto could only think of one thing: what the hell did he get himself into? Naruto sat on a cliff, allowing his chakra to flow freely overhead. A powerful storm cloud thundered. The Khalasar was all inside their tents or whatever, relaxing, while he alone was outside. Drogo's tent was less than a dozen feet away and was open so that he could peer inside. Shirera, Daenerys, Jon, Arya and Drogo were watching keenly as the lightning bolts fell from the heavens, the rain pelting the ground with immense power, but Naruto remained rooted. However, it was not to be, as a bolt of lightning struck down where Naruto was, but as the blinding light died down, the shocking image before them stilled. All inside, Naruto had caught the bolt of electricity in his hand without even moving from his position. With a snort, the blonde twisted his wrist and snapped it from its connection in the sky and extended his hand out, his chakra holding constant control over the bolt as he slowly rose up and began to sway deeply, his arms slowly rounding themselves as he shrunk the bolt, the blade of lightning slowly changing color from white to red to purple to even green before it was soon as long as he was tall and a blinding gold color. Reaching out, he grasped the bolt in his hand and raised his arm up and hurled it down at the beach, where it exploded violently. The earth shook before quickly calming. Naruto snorted as he dusted his hands off. However, before he could sit back down, a hand rested on his shoulder and he slowly turned to see Drogo's large frame next to his, a wide grin on his face. Never have I seen such power. Blood of my blood, to tame even the might of the heavens is no small feat. I wish for you to teach me so that our horde may grow in strength, so that I may teach my sons and daughters to use the power of the skies against their enemies, he told the blonde. Naruto shrugged. I wouldn't know how to teach such things, my call. I learned through trial and error on how to use such gifts. As far as I am aware, Khaleesi and her family members have the potential to utilize such abilities. From what I can sense, if you have the power to do so, I would not know how to go about in allowing you to harness the sky's power, he said calmly. Like hell he would teach this man, nor his horde of savages, how to use the power of the Heaven's Stone. Release was unique, but in the hands of someone who knew how to use it, it was a destructive force of power, and that was before enhancing the regular lightning to create the third Raikage's fabled black lightning. Naruto sat by the fire eating a piece of fish he had gotten at Oasis whenever he wasn't traveling the grass sea with the horde. He was training Jon in how to use a sword, Arya how to use an actual fighting style, Daenerys how to hold a sword properly, or he was secretly meeting with Shirero. Let's just say if the call found out some of the more hidden activities they pulled, it wouldn't be pretty, and leave it at that. Having been with the large horde of horse riders for nearly 2 months, he was almost surprised by how quick his relationship with Shirero had developed to its current level of intimacy between them. He had recently presented her with a set of Valyrian seal swords he had taken from Illyrio back when he first met her. Her family blades, if what she said was true, something he hadn't realized when he gave them to her. Now with her and her family again, he had opted to give Arya the twin lightning blades as they were more suited for her size. He had been told to give Jon a sword, but he gifted one of his own personal Valyrian steel blades made in Dorne and Yura one of the remaining 7 he brought. Their lessons were slow but progressive in good ways. Shirera held onto the swords he had given her Dark Sister and Blackfire, he recalled her naming the man was giving her lessons on how to use them. Naruto himself had an interesting 2 months. The first few days as one of Drogo's blood riders was filled with constant fighting, as a few members of the Khalasar didn't approve of a foreigner sitting in the position beside their call. The young assassin was attacked by Dothraki warriors for days before they finally understood why Drogo appointed him as a blood rider. Naruto Uzumaki was a nearly unstoppable killing machine after solidifying His spot Drogo appointed one of Drogo's blood riders. The Khal appointed Iri one of Daenerys' handmaidens to teach him of the Dothraki culture and the responsibilities that came with being a blood rider to the Great Khal. While Naruto spent most of his time in lessons with Iri or training with Yora, he managed to slip in sword lessons with Shirira 3 times a week. No one understood why Naruto trained with the new Khaleesi, but Naruto claimed that a strong Khaleesi would make Drogo's Khalasar more feared than it already was, and the Horse Lord allowed the lessons to continue. The only Dothraki city is V's Dothrak. It is ruled by the dash'Khaleen, wise women who were once the wives of now dead Khals. If Khal Drogo is to fall, it is a blood rider's responsibility to escort their Khaleesi to V's Dothrak to join the dash'Khaleen before they themselves join their Khal in the afterlife. Naruto internally groaned. He had no intentions on turning Shirira or her kin over to these dash'Khaleen, and he definitely would not take his own life when Drogo died, mainly because he planned on being the orchestrator behind the Horse Lord's death. The only reason he agreed to be a blood rider was to gain the trust of the Khal, to further his infiltration and be close enough to Shirira to protect her better. Plus, he wasn't sure if he would have survived had he turned down the offer. Thank you, Iri, your lessons are always enlightening. I will serve the Khal to the best of my abilities. Iri blushed at Naruto's praise and looked down at the ground as the oblivious assassin continued to ride. Only Drogo noticed, and he simply smirked. Not too far behind them, Shirira watched the two interact. In the last 2 months, Shirira grew closer to the last Uzumaki as they would steal small kisses under the moonlight during training sessions, and Naruto continued to tell her stories of his travels and battles he had experienced in his brief life. But ever since Iri began her lessons with Naruto, she began drifting more and more towards him, and it made her blood boil. Are you okay, Khaleesi? Shirira was brought out of her thoughts by Yora. I'm fine, sir. Yora, you need to drink and eat. Yora handed her a piece of dried horse meat, and her stomach turned. Isn't there anything else? Yora shook his head. The Dothraki have 2 things in abundance: grass and horses, and it's sad to say, but people can't live on grass. Shirira sighed and began nibbling on the piece of meat, while looking at Naruto, who must have told Iri a joke because her handmaid could barely contain her laughter. Yora followed her gaze, but only saw Khal Drogo, who rode in his line of sight. The aged knight looked the young Targaryen girl. It'll get easier. Shirira ignored the knight and began riding forward. A few hours later, the Khalasar set up camp, and Naruto shed most of his gear, leaving him in his pants, boots, and a white shirt. He also kept Kubikura Bocho on his back just in case. He spent most of the day playing with the kids of the Khalasar. They seemed fond of his acrobatic abilities as he entertained them with handstands and flips. After a while, he decided to go check on Shirira, who he had heard wasn't well. When they made camp, the assassin walked into Shirira's tent and found her being attended to by her handmaidens. Khaleesi, can I have a word in private? The Targaryen girl simply nodded to her handmaidens, and they swiftly left the tent, but not before Iri spared a glance at the young assassin. When the two were alone, Naruto gently took her hands in his and inspected them. I heard you were hurt when we arrived at camp. Why didn't you tell me? Shirira looked down and stayed silent, but Naruto lifted her chin up, forcing her to look him in his eyes. What happened? The slightly older woman looked at, and he saw tears threatening to spill from her eyes. You told me you'd protect me. Naruto looked at her confused. Before inspecting her wounds again, this time he was able to come to the conclusion that the cause of her wounds were from gripping something extremely hard. It didn't take long for him to figure out why, and then slowly brought the young princess's hands up to his lips before placing a soft kiss on them. I did. I promised I would protect you as well as your family, and I'm not the type of person to break promises, but I'm also not one to sugarcoat things either. What do you mean? Naruto brushed a lock of her hair behind her ear. Right now we are a group of foreigners, surrounded by hordes of savages. If we run, they'll find us and I'll be killed, and then it won't be just Drogo you'll have to worry about. Your sister and your niece would be raped by everyone in this horde 100 times, and any children you sired will be killed as they rape you all over again. She looked horrified, but Naruto put his lips over hers. The Targaryen felt his tongue enter her mouth as she leaned into his body, enjoying the feeling of him being pressed up against her when he pulled away. Daenerys saw fire burning in his eyes. But as long as I live, I won't let that happen. I said I was going to protect you, and I'm going to do just that, but sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do to survive. His words loomed over her as she processed what he said. Please, I don't want. Naruto cut her off with another kiss. Her words died in her throat as she melted into the kiss. When he pulled away, she didn't see the fire that was there before. This time she saw conflict. I know you don't want to do it. I don't want you to do it, but if want to leave with our heads, you have to learn how to make Drogo happy. What are you talking about? Naruto took a deep breath before he spoke. The art of seduction. Many women don't like using it, but it is an effective tool that can be used to whisper in the Khal's ear. All you have to do is learn how to master it. Shirira looked down at the floor, and Naruto lifted her chin up. Do you trust me? The woman only nodded, and Naruto wanted nothing more than to tell her she didn't have to do this, but he knew that would be a lie. She did have to do this. She may not have been a member of the Brotherhood, but he saw qualities in her that would make her a great assassin. If she decided to go that route, she would have to make tough decisions. All he was doing was preparing her for that. I know this is going to be tough. I've personally done things I didn't want to do during my travels, but sometimes the toughest decision is the best decision. Shirara pondered the choice. Every part of her body was telling her not to do it, but all doubt disappeared when she looked into Naruto's eyes. No one ever looked at her the way Naruto looked at her. He actually cared for her, and she hoped that he would do whatever it took to protect her. I'll do it. Naruto nodded and kissed the top of her head. Thank you, Shirara. When we get out of this, I'll make it up to you. The assassin gave her one last kiss. Before leaving the tent, he began walking through the camp until he found his target. He grabbed the arm of an unsuspecting brunette and dragged her to his tent. Once inside, Naruto looked Doria in her eyes as the girl had a lustful smirk on her face. I knew you wanted me. How can I be of service to you? Naruto smirked as Doria approached him, but before she could touch her, he grabbed her hand and pulled her towards him. Not to me or Khaleesi.